You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Thanks for adventuring with us as we discover what incredible athletes and outdoor enthusiasts are doing all over the world.
Hey friends, welcome to the show today. We have Pip Hare with us, and Pip was actually on the Adventure Sports Podcast almost 3 years ago, back in August of 23. And I remember just being amazed by her stories. She, at a young age, took up sailing, but not just, sailing around the local reservoir. She took up solo sailing around the globe, and she is a really prominent figure in the yachting and sailing racing world for all of her exploits. She's done so many amazing things. We'll dive into that here in just a little bit, but she has a new book called My Element that talks about some of her crazy ocean adventures, solo sailing, and we have so many other things to talk about. But if you want to hear the backstory, August 2023 was the episode. It was 9:58, and we're going to continue on where we left off. Pip, welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me back.
I am a fan. Every time I think of you and your story, I'm just kind of blown away. And a part of that might be my naivete, but I don't think so. I've been landlocked my whole life. And so for me, sailing, deepwater sailing, especially solo deepwater sailing, just sounds so far out there. What got you interested in that all the way back when you were a teenager that made you think this is a thing I've got to do?
Well, I didn't kind of grow up around the water either. I grew up in a landlocked county in the east of England, but I was lucky enough to have access to the water because my grandfather had a boat when I was a kid, and so we used to go down and see him on weekends or holidays, and so kind of like being on a boat was something that I was familiar with. But I really fell in love with the sport when I was a teenager. And my parents sent me off on a holiday on my own when I was 16 because they thought it would be good for me to go and experience a holiday without the family. And they chose a sailing holiday for me. And it just grabbed me. It was a week with other young people on the water. And I think at that age, you're being told you need to start acting more like an adult. You're being told you need to be responsible for stuff, you need to make good decisions, and yet in the UK anyway, there's very little agency. You can't drive, you can't vote, you're still at school, and yet you put a teenager in a sailing boat and they can drive, they can risk take, they can make decisions, and I loved the agency it gave me, but also it was the first time really that I had kind of really looked at an empty horizon and thought, the world's on the other side of that and I can get there in this boat. So kind of everything together just made me think, whoa, this is it. This is an incredible sport and this is how I'm going to spend my life.
And you have. Would you mind, I see brief lists of some of the accomplishments that you've done in sailing, but would you mind just kind of giving us bullet points of your sailing resume, the things that you've done?
This is a very uncomfortable thing to ask a British person to do.
I understand.
So I have competed in 2 Vendée Globe races, which is a single-handed non-stop sailing race around the world. And I'm one of only 3 women in the world to compete in 2 of those races. I finished one of them. I've been racing solo since 2009 in various different classes, kind of climbed my way up, and now I have one of the top 10 international ocean racing teams. I've got a world speed sailing record, which is an outright world speed sailing record. So it's not a women's record, it's the record. And that's for a solo circumnavigation of the Isle of Wight. I am one of only 2 people in the world, the other person being my co-skipper, who has completed the Three Peaks yacht race double-handed. So that's a race in the UK which is normally sailed by teams of 5 distinct runners and sailors, and it's a sailing and running race. So it's 3 mountain marathons, and you sail between the mountain marathons. And me and my co-skipper Charles are the only people in the world who have ever completed that race double-handed. So we did all the sailing and all the running. I like sailing.
It sounds like it. Well, that's amazing to me. Like I said, having always been landlocked, anything about sailing just knocks my socks off. Really does. I think it's amazing. A few questions about that, just to kind of inform the audience. I think there are probably a lot of people like me who don't know much about sailing, but then there are others who are just avid sailors themselves. What's it like, just in general, to do deep water sailing, where you're way out there, you don't see land anymore? It's you, it's the boat, it's the ocean. And then, to make it a little bit more challenging, what's it like to solo sail in waters like that?
So I think kind of being out in the middle of the ocean is a lot like being in the middle of the desert or being in the middle of the mountains. You know, when you're so immersed in nature, when you can look all around you and the only sign of mankind is you and your vehicle or your vessel. You know, it's that feeling of absolutely being immersed in the natural world. I think that is kind of equatable to anybody who adventures anywhere on our planet that takes them out of the normal path of mankind. You know, you need to learn to work with the natural world around you, and you also need to take a huge responsibility for yourself and your survival. And I think those are feelings that other people will recognize and understand. Kind of being in the middle of the ocean is not one thing, because it can change so rapidly and so frequently. You know, we go from, I think the biggest waves I've ever sailed through are 13-meter waves. I actually was in a boat that got turned upside down in 13-meter waves. I mean, that's terrifying. That's having an enormous slab-sided block of water come towards you, you know, in that magnitude. It's terrible, it's dark, it's aggressive, the noise is unbelievable. And then kind of all the way at the other end of the scale, you can be completely becalmed in the middle of the night, where the surface of the sea is so flat that you can actually see reflections of the stars in the surface of the sea. And there's anything in between and everything in between. You know, every time you go out to cross an ocean, you know that you are going to encounter the most incredible change, and you will see a situation that you've never seen before, because we cannot know the true extent of everything that's out there in nature. And then racing a boat, you're working with that. You're taking the helm of this incredibly well-designed, well-built, fine-tuned, wild machine. You know, these boats we race go so fast, they fly above the surface of the water. And you're the interface between man's ingenuity and the power of nature. and you have to work with nature. You have to keep safe, but you have to keep fast, and it's amazing.
It sounds very, very exhilarating, but a little bit terrifying to me. Were you naturally from the beginning just maybe a little extra brave, or another way to say it is, were you fearful when you started, and are you fearful now?
So I don't think I'm brave. I'm curious. I want to know. I want to know what I'm capable of. And I love fast boats. I mean, I love them. And so, there are moments where I have been scared, but you're always scared of the unknown. You're scared of something you haven't done before. And most of it is, when you really think about it, you're scared because you don't know how you're going to manage it. But one of the incredible things about solo sailing is that it elevates you as a person, because there is no one to help you. Every single situation that comes your way, every single challenge, every single opportunity, you have to grab it, resolve it, push, be the solution, because there's no other way out. And so even when you are scared, you're forced into this situation of stepping up and dealing with things in a way that maybe if someone else was there, you might pass. You might allow them to take the lead because they're stronger, or they're more knowledgeable, or more experienced. And so you do kind of develop more. There's always a lot of adrenaline. I mean, there's a lot of adrenaline running most of the time. But you do develop this ability to reassure yourself when you're scared. You just kind of think, okay, well, I've done this before, or I've done something similar before, or I don't know how this is exactly going to pan out, but I'll be okay. It will be okay. And that kind of confidence really helps deal with the difficult situations.
I really believe that there's a lot of value in doing solo adventure. And the main reason is what you just outlined there. There's no one else there, so you have to step up, and you learn so much about yourself, about self-reliance and managing things that maybe you didn't know you could manage before. But it adds a large element of risk. There's no one there to help if something goes wrong. Have you ever been to the point of just thinking, if someone were here to help right now, I would love that assistance, or someone to kind of look out for me? Or did that ever occur to you?
I think in my earlier days as a solo sailor, then I know there were definitely times where I was just, aching for someone just to come and help me. Because I felt, normally it's down to exhaustion. When you get physically exhausted, then your mental state naturally isn't so positive, and you doubt your ability to deal with things. But, kind of as my solo career progressed, and kind of as I've got into the more extreme end of solo sailing, I always, whenever I kind of get myself close to the point of wishing someone was there with me, I always kind of take a step back and say to myself, right, you have driven yourself down this road. You chose to be here. And it's not like it was the first time I've ever tried solo sailing. I have taken a very deliberate career path, and I have pushed and pushed and pushed. And that kind of is a double thing, because it reminds me that, it's the decisions that I've made in life that have got me to this point. Therefore, it's my job to sort it out. But it also, again, just gives that confidence. It's like, well, you got to here, so why can't you carry on? You know, everything you've done so far has got you to this point, and you're not doing too badly. So crack on.
That's quite the self-encouragement talk. Wow. Crack on. What's the longest that you've been solo on these ventures?
So that's my first Vendée Globe race, which was 2020, and that was 94 days at sea.
94 days, so 3 months of sailing alone and facing all of those challenges. I mean, how do you even stay safe? There's shipping traffic to be watched for. There's navigating that has to take place, and you need to sleep at some point.
So we rely very heavily on technology to manage the boat and to manage kind of situational awareness. So there are alarms all over the boat. I use VHF radio to detect the movement of any vessels around me, and also radar as well. And you set up guard alarms, so if anything comes within a certain radius of your vessel, then an alarm will go off. But also I have a very clever autopilot driving the boat, and then just alarms all over the boat that will tell me if the wind has changed, if the wind direction has changed, if the sea state has changed, if the boat speed has changed. It tells me if I'm getting close to the land, kind of there's alarms everywhere. And then you spend your life at sea managing an impossibly long job list. Kind of in any given 24 hours, there are more jobs than one person can do. And that's kind of all around the maintenance of the boat, running repairs, changing sails, keeping the boat sailing fast, downloading weather information, setting up the autopilot, making water, making food, and sleeping. And you tend to sleep in short bursts, especially with a super fast boat. So the last boat that I raced in the Vendée was capable of speeds of around 45, 46 miles an hour. And
wow.
When the boats go that fast, you can't just go to sleep for a long period of time, because things are changing all the time and you can come up upon hazards quite quickly. So you tend to sleep for 30 minutes at a time, and then you wake up, you check everything's okay. If everything's okay, you can go back to sleep for another 30 minutes. If not, then you get up, you do stuff, you go back to sleep. And over a 24-hour period, the minimum that I would require is 4 hours. I try and get 4 hours. If I'm in a very stable environment, or for example, the Southern Ocean where there's not a lot of traffic, then within a 24-hour period, I should be able to bank a 2-hour sleep, which means I can go through light sleep, deep sleep, and REM. But when it's busy, you keep waking up before you get into deep sleep. So you might do, let's say, 10, 30-minute sleeps, which means you can get your REM and your light sleep, but you never go into a deep sleep.
That's exhausting. So much of our mental acuity depends on that deep sleep. What does it do to you to go for 3 months and rarely get that deep rest?
So you adapt. And I guess, the thing about human beings is that we can adapt, and largely, we don't use a lot of our there's a lot of brain function that we don't necessarily use in the life that we have. So I think you definitely feel better after you've enabled a deep sleep cycle, but on the average transatlantic race, which is like 10 days, we don't do deep sleep. So we will quite happily get to the end of a 10-day race, and you're fatigued, but you learn to manage it in a different way. You just have to be very self-aware And I do little things like, for example, I will do mental arithmetic in my head. Nothing crazily difficult, but I'll be saying, okay, so what is 136 minus 34? And if I can't do that easily in my head, then I know I shouldn't be making any decisions, and I should kind of elevate my risk assessment somewhat. And then that would either trigger me to sleep or just look after myself a bit better if there is no time to sleep. But even taking a 5-minute sleep will give you a boost to get through a difficult time. Just tiny sleeps.
Oh, wow. So sometimes it's just a matter of waking up. Do you have a routine that makes you more alert?
I think what's interesting is that when I'm racing, I kind of move into a different state almost. It's now become just normal to be, when I'm racing, so you don't ever really lie down in a bed. You know, I have a beanbag on the floor that I sleep on, and you don't ever get undressed. You just sit down and sleep. And I will be asleep in less than 10 seconds. And then I either wake up on my own or I have an alarm that goes off that wakes me up. And so long as I don't wake up mid-deep sleep cycle, then I can literally just bounce onto my feet and I'm ready to go. It's not the same on the land, though. On the land, you know, I don't bounce out of bed in the morning on the land. I'm a snooze button hitter for sure. The only difficult time, and I have had, a couple of occurrences where I've been woken up during a deep sleep cycle, and then that can be really difficult because you are so groggy and disorientated that it's almost like you didn't go to sleep, and you do have to be quite careful when that happens.
Hey friends, let's talk about chewing gum for a moment. Nathan & Sons asked that I run this ad for them, and my first thought was, if this isn't really healthy, good stuff, I don't want to do it. I'd had their gum already, and I found it kind of unique and fresh, but I wanted to make sure that it was a product that I could stand behind. So I looked into it, I looked at all their ingredients, I looked at the product, and actually I'm very impressed. It's quickly apparent that this isn't regular gum. This is remineralizing gum. That's a mouthful. You know, you brush your teeth in the morning and at night, but after lunch there's this gap where most of us do nothing for our teeth. Underbrush is made for that moment. You chew it for 5 or 10 minutes, then spit it out and move on. Or, of course, you can keep chewing it. I mean, it's good gum. It's made with hydroxyapatite. It's the same mineral that your enamel is made from. And natural saps. This is a cool part, like mastic and spruce. So it has this firmer, really satisfying chew. They actually make it themselves from scratch. The company is only a few years old, and the team is literally making, packing, and shipping gum every day. So if you want a simple daily upgrade for your teeth, check out Underbrush from Nathan & Sons. Hey, a brief coming-of-age story. When I was 17, my mom and dad and my sister and I decided to do an extended family road trip. We made it as far south as Carlsbad, as far west as Sequoia National Park and Yosemite National Parks. We made it as far north as Glacier National Park. But there, I split off from the family. They went home, and I went to Seattle. I met my friend Jason. He and I traveled all the way across Canada, down the eastern seaboard in a 1968 Volkswagen, and we camped in a tent the whole way across the North American continent. I came back changed. In many ways, I left home a boy and returned home a man. It was life-impacting. We didn't fly over the North American continent. We traveled through it. If you would like to connect the dots of this continent, then today's sponsor is here to help. I'm talking about Outdoorsy, of course. Outdoorsy has thousands of RVs and campers nationwide. They're available right in your neighborhood, and you can drive it yourself, you can tow it, you can actually have it delivered and fully set up your destination if you want to. They have comprehensive insurance, 24/7 customer service, roadside assistance, so you have built-in peace of mind. It's a great value. It's often less expensive than hotels, and it allows for a really fun family and group approach to travel. It's available to renters 21 years and older. So get your RV in 3 simple steps. You search through the inventory and choose one that's right for your trip and your group size. Book it with confidence and hit the road. It's that easy. This summer is massive. Think about this. The big international soccer tournament coming to North America. America's 250th anniversary with celebrations across the country. The 100th anniversary of Route 66. It's one of the most iconic road trip routes ever, and I have traveled much of that. It's really cool. An RV isn't just transportation, it's how you can stay closer to the action. Think for a moment about family reunions in RVs. How about traveling with parents or grandkids, friends, or even pets? How about getting closer to the trailhead or the river or the beach than the hotel allows? And how fun would it be to have an RV for music festival weekends? And you can save money by using the code ASP when you book your RV. Right now, my listeners can have all the service fees removed from their booking in 2026 with the code ASP at outdoorsy.com. That's OUTDOORSY.com, and use the code ASP at checkout to remove those service fees. Why not take the time to actually see this amazing nation we live in and let Outdoorsy.com make it easier for you? So you mentioned having a boat turned upside down by very large waves. And so I am not a sailor, but once I was in 5-meter seas in a boat that was rated for 5-meter seas, and I thought we may not make it. It was terrifying to me. But you said 30-meter seas?
13 meter, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Tell us that story. We've got to hear it.
It was quite a long time ago. So it was very early 2000s, and I wasn't alone. I was with one other person on a 12-meter boat, 40 foot. And kind of back then, we didn't have the kind of weather forecasts that we get now. Generally, when you were making a passage, then you relied on a synoptic chart. You'd kind of get synoptic charts before you left for the next 5 days, which were generally quite reliable. And then you would make your decisions for passage planning based on those charts. Then when you were out at sea, you got these forecasts that were just text forecasts for sea areas. And this was a crossing of the Bay of Biscay, which is between northern France and northern Spain. And the thing about the Bay of Biscay is it's where the continental shelf is. So you get all the waves coming across the Atlantic with all of that momentum, these huge waves. And then when they get to the continental shelf in the Biscay, they can break, because as suddenly the sea goes up from over a mile deep to meters deep. And it gets very rough. And what happened on this occurrence was there was a weather system which is called a rapidly developing low, which is like a little weather bomb. It's sort of a bit like a hurricane almost, but it develops faster. And in between getting this weather fax and arriving in Spain, this rapidly developing low suddenly turned up in the Bay of Biscay right on my course, and we had hurricane force winds with virtually no warning. And the boat I was in kind of got to the stage where we couldn't control the boat, because in the trough of the wave there was no wind, because the waves were so big that the whole boat was sheltered by this wall of oncoming water, and there was no wind. So the boat would just kind of just flop around, and then the wave would it would start moving up the face of the wave. The top of the wave would break as soon as there was no sail up on the boat at all. But as soon as the top of the mast got above the top of the wave, because it's hurricane force winds, the boat was just blown over sideways and then would skid mast first down the breaking wave. And so me and the other person on board, the biggest risk there was actually that we would either be washed over the side or break a limb through trying to stay on deck. It was crazy to stay on deck. So we just kind of tied off the wheel and went down below, and the boat was rolled upside down while I was down below. And I was thrown onto the roof of the boat. And then everything in every cupboard flew out. There were glass jars smashing. It wasn't a race boat, so it was full of just normal tools everywhere. It was, it was not something I'd want to repeat.
That sounds terrifying. So I assume the boat self-righted.
Yes, so it does depend a bit on the boat. In this case, then yes, the boat did come up. What normally happens in those cases is that the mast breaks, and then because the keel, you've got a big heavy keel on the bottom of the boat will flip back upright again. And in that case, the mast didn't break actually, and the boat was flipped upright, but it was pretty much destroyed by the water.
That's unbelievable. Did you fear for your life? Did you think this time we may not get out?
Do you know, I didn't, because I had taken the time. It was kind of one of the first really big trips that I'd ever done in command of a vessel, and I'd really taken the time to understand the important characteristics for a vessel that is going out into the open ocean. So kind of, you said you were in a boat that was rated for 5-metre waves. I made sure, the boat I was in wasn't ever rated for 13-metre waves, but I did kind of make sure that I understood the basic design principles for what happens to a boat if it gets into big waves. And I was really sure that this was a strong, well-built boat that would be, even if the mast broke, it would be a safe place to be, to ride through a storm. And so, I was very frightened at the time, and I didn't know what would happen, but I never feared for my life.
Wow. How long were you stuck in that storm?
The storm was about 36 hours.
Talking about exhaustion, 36 hours. What was it like when finally everything started to subside and you said, we can sail again?
So you're still in the middle of the ocean. So I guess, it was just a lot of surveying of the damage, and then kind of we'd lost power as well because there was a lot of water down below, and so and it didn't just go to flat calm afterwards. Kind of it dropped off from hurricane force to gale force, and so there's an interesting time where you kind of have to decide whether you're brave enough to go outside again, and you obviously you lose all the instruments that were telling you how strong the wind is, kind of all of that. You lose all of that, and so then you have to gauge kind of relatively what the conditions are, and that's a bit strange afterwards, the kind of aftermath of a big sea state and stuff like that. And then really it was just a question of kind of falling back, because so much is damaged and you lose so much of the kind of electrical help that you have on board. So you have to fall back on the basic seamanship of, okay, well, I need to work out where I am. I need to work out where I'm going to go and how I'm going to get there safely. And I think in those moments you do put aside any emotion and turn to a very practical self that is your survival self, if you like. And those are the skills that are going to get you out of the situation you're in and kind of move on to better times.
So what was one of the first things you did? I'm going to speak beyond my knowledge here, okay? Did you put out a little bit of like a storm jib or a sea anchor, or what were some of the first things you needed to do to say, okay, we can steer this thing again?
So it was actually just, so the autopilot was broken. So it was kind of back to hand steering. And so then it was just a really good internal and external check of the steering system to make sure that it worked and it hadn't been damaged at all. And that's just a kind of getting in there with a head torch and crawling down into the locker space and checking all the cables and very mechanical thing. And then it was just kind of putting up a storm jib. Yeah, literally just sailing with a storm jib and making way gently to the shore.
That story just amazes me. Pip, there have been a few times in my life where I wasn't sure I was going to make it. And I'm sure that had I been in your situation, I would not have been nearly as confident as you were. The idea of saying, wow, we got away with that one, that's where I would have been. And did it scare you enough to make you think, is it a good idea to solo around the world?
No.
Did it make you take pause?
No, not at all, no. No, the person who was with me actually said they didn't ever want to go sailing again. And they did, but no, I guess kind of by then I'd already sailed 120,000 miles, and I think I just looked at it quite philosophically, because I'd never had an experience like that before, and I just thought, well, you go out enough times, you're going to end up in a situation, and I think it was probably my turn. But no, it didn't put me off.
Well, in your book, My Element, you discuss being dismasted in a race. So it sounds like things did happen again later on. What is that story?
So I have taken the start line of the Vendée Globe single-handed round the world race twice. First time was in 2020 and I finished the race. The second time was in 2024 and my mast broke exactly halfway around the world. On day 35 of the race, I was halfway between Australia and Antarctica. And the mast, which is a 30-metre high carbon tube, it's huge. It's elliptical in shape, and this section of it is nearly a metre long. It's about 700 millimetres long, or centimetres rather. And it was just in the morning. I was waiting to do a sail change. There was nothing extreme or incredible happening. And the boat's a flying boat, so when it gains speed, it lifts out of the water. And when it crash lands, it's quite aggressive. And it took off and landed. And when it landed, the mast shattered into two pieces and fell over the side, which was devastating. This race is every 4 years. I had been working towards it for 4 years. Me, my team, my sponsors. We'd put 4 years of training, development, preparation into this race, and I was kind of all guns blazing for a top 10 finish. And just to watch that mast come down, which takes about 2 seconds, was just a genuinely terrible thing and devastating, just because of the loss of so much. I've been working it was the greatest race of my career, and to lose it like that, so you've got all of that emotion, which is grief stricken. I mean, it is grief stricken. And then you are 800 miles from the nearest point of land. No mast. Well, there is a mast, but the mast is now in the water, basically trying to bash a hole in the side of the boat. And so, kind of again, it's a point where you pack up the emotion, put it to one side. And job number one is to make sure that the situation doesn't get any worse. So I had to make sure that the mast didn't punch a hole in the side of the boat. So cut everything free. And you're cutting free, it's awful. Everything that I cut off that boat, me and my team had worked so hard to put it there.
Right.
And then I needed to try and salvage as much as I could so that I could build myself a makeshift mast so I could self-rescue back to Australia, because there is no one there. There's no one between Australia and Antarctica, and no one's going to come and get you. So I had to build a new mast out of the wreckage, and then sail myself back to Australia.
Wow, what a story. So this is all in your book?
Actually, no, that's not in my book.
Okay.
My book is about the first Vendée. So my book was actually written just before I set off on the second one. And it was about the first Vendée. So in the book, I change a rudder in the Southern Ocean. I climb to the top of the mast while it's sailing. But I don't dismast.
Okay. So we need another book then, I think, Pip. I want to hear the details of that story. Did you sort out, besides just the forces involved, did you sort out any cause for the mast breaking? I mean, was it a problem with the sheets? Was it a problem with the carbon fiber? Just too much wind?
We think it was a problem with the carbon fiber in the mast. So kind of, as I mentioned, there are sensors all over the boat. And so I have a really good black box record of the boat speed, the wind speed, the loads that were in the mast. We've got kind of all of the data around kind of the environmental data and the data from on the boat. And there was nothing that was wrong at the time the mast broke. And so kind of we can only assume that because the 2 weeks previous had been very, very rough conditions. And so the boat was slamming a lot because it was taking off and landing. And we can only really assume that potentially the masts gained some sort of fracture during those 2 weeks. And the fracture had just been growing. And that was just the point at which it reached failure. But because I wasn't able to save the mast, because it was jabbing a hole in the boat, and I wouldn't have been able to pull a 30-metre mast and everything with it onto the boat anyway, we're never going to be able to see the mast and know. But there's no clues from the data at all.
So you had to rig a temporary mast and sail out of there. Tell us about that. It sounds like you MacGyvered it.
So yeah, I had. It was something that I had mentally rehearsed. I'd never actually physically had a go at building a jury rig, we call them. I'd never had a go at building one before, but I had thought about it because dismasting is not an infrequent thing to happen in the class of boat that I race. And so, I had thought, how would I do this? And I was able to rescue one of my deck spreaders and I used that as the mast. I attached ropes around the top of it, and then there was kind of like a ball on the bottom, and I knew that was going to be super slippery on the deck. So I got a neoprene scuba balaclava from my diving kit, and I wrapped that around this shiny ball to make it a bit more sticky onto the deck. And then I was able to anchor the bottom of that onto the deck, and then ratchet strap it in place. And kind of one of the hard bits was actually getting the mast in the air, because the boat's 60 foot long. Kind of all the ropes go back to the cockpit. So between where the makeshift mast was itself and where the ropes to manage it was a space of about 20 feet that I was having to run up and down to try and get this thing in the air. And there was quite a lot of trial and error. So I kind of tightened the ropes up as tight as I could, over tighten them using the big power on the winches. And then I would run forwards and just kind of throw the mast up in the air. And if I tightened the ropes enough, then it kind of stayed maybe kind of 2 inches higher up than it had before, and then I'd go back, tighten the ropes up, go 20 feet away, throw it up in the air again. So there was quite a lot of trial and error on that. But I think the thing that surprised me was it only took me about 3 hours to build this rig after I dismasted. And I was devastated. I was so cut apart by the race having ended like that. But in the moment it took me to build this mast, I was almost kind of content. Because I'd just put the emotion of not finishing the race so tightly into this little box that I wasn't going to open until I knew I was safe. I kind of almost caught myself being happy in my work building this mast. It was, I guess there's a pride in being able to take control of the situation. It's like, okay, something really bad has happened, but I've still got this. I'm still okay. But then as soon as I had got the mast up in the air and I'd converted my storm sail to go on the mast, and the boat was actually then sailing really slowly. It was sailing about 3 miles an hour towards Australia. And I was safe. I was 100% safe. I had everything I needed. The boat was safe. I had power. I had water. I had food. I was going in the right direction. And it was then that, I had 24 hours of just absolute darkness. I just sat inside my boat in the dark and cried and cried and cried. And I didn't move. My body hurt. My head hurt. I just was properly grieving.
Right.
And that was, that was probably the worst bit of it. But after 24 hours, I think I just realised, okay, well, it's going to take me 2 weeks to get to Australia, and I cannot stay down here for 2 weeks. I can't be like this for 2 weeks. And so I decided I would do something every day to make my situation better, to try and make the boat a bit faster, to kind of optimize the interior of the boat, to change the algorithm on my autopilot to steer a slow boat instead of a fast boat. And I started making these little videos, and I call the videos the slow boat to Melbourne. And I made myself accountable and basically kind of went out to the people who'd been following the race and said, okay, I'm going to show you what happens after this. I'm going to share this with you, and I am going to do something every day to make my situation better. And so I started cutting up sails and making a 2-sail rig. I changed the weight distribution on the boat. I changed the sheeting angles on some of the sails, and I made these little videos every day, and actually kind of it was such great therapy, and got quite a cult following. You can still see them on YouTube. They're called the Slow Boat to Melbourne, and I mean, people came to those videos having not watched the race. They came and watched me sailing this, and I ended up, arriving into Melbourne. I'd achieved my previous top speed in the race had been 39.6 knots. And coming into Melbourne, I achieved a top speed of I think it was 7.9 knots. And I was as happy doing 7.9 knots as I had been doing 39.6. But then the best thing about it, and I think the real gift of my dismasting, was my arrival into Melbourne, because the sailing community in Melbourne had heard that I was coming in there, and they just decided they were going to look after me. And so they organised a berth, they organised my customs clearance. A group of local sailors came out in a motorboat and met me outside the Port Phillip Heads, and then escorted me in. So they stayed by the boat overnight so I could sleep. And I slept, and then in the morning they showed me the way into the harbour. And as I came across the harbour, there were boats coming from everywhere. They all had signs that they were holding up, welcoming me. And when I got into the dock in Melbourne, there was a crowd of hundreds of people there waiting to welcome me in. And, from the moment I got within 50 miles of Melbourne, all the people in Melbourne just opened their arms out to me and looked after me and made me feel so welcome. It was unbelievable, really unbelievable.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. I think we humans are all right.
We are.
We can be really great people.
I
love it when people step up.
Yeah. It really was, and it was the most devastating thing to happen, and I will never get over the feeling of loss from that race. But as a result, I met the most incredible human beings, and I feel lucky.
I should have asked this sooner, but will you describe what the boat was? Was it a hydrofoil?
So it's a foiling boat that it has. So it's 80 meters long, mast is 30 meters high, the keel is 4.5 meters deep, and then it has these big curved wings, effectively sticking out of the side of the boat, and they lift the boat clean out of the water. And the wings just work exactly like a plane wing, but through water. So as soon as you're going at a certain speed, the shape of the wings lifts the boat clean out of the water. And it will fly, if you get it wrong, it will fly kind of about 3-4 meters above the surface of the water. The idea is, it's only flying about 2 meters above.
Okay.
But there's no stability is the problem. So it flies. Obviously, you're not on you see all the kind of America's Cup and Sail GP boats, and they're flying on dead flat water. But we're in the middle of the ocean in waves. So we don't have that. We don't have that stability that they do. So it kind of almost porpoises in a way. So it flies and then lands, and flies and lands. It can be quite a rough ride. You get a lot of bruises. You have to wear a hat.
Goodness. That's amazing. The subtitle on your book, at least the one that I found, says, Life Lessons from the World's Toughest Solo Ocean Race. And I think you have shared a lot of those lessons already, but can you highlight some of the things that you learned by doing this and other races like this?
So I guess my reason for writing the book was because, lots of people ask me questions that are not sailing related. So they ask me, how do you manage with loneliness? How do you stay motivated? What do you do when you're afraid? And so kind of in the book, I used stories of my solo ocean racing to answer those common questions. And it's things like, how do you manage when you're afraid? And when I'm afraid, I take the time to address my fear, and I kind of say to myself, okay, what is it you're afraid of, and why are you afraid of it? And even to the point of writing it down, I will list all the reasons. Say, for example, climbing the mast on my own. I'll list all the reasons why I'm scared of climbing the mast on my own. And then I take each of those points and I mitigate against it. So I'll say, okay, well,
Right.
You're frightened you're going to fall, but you are using the best kit that has been tested. You're frightened you're not strong enough, but you've done this before. You're frightened the autopilot will fail, but the autopilot's been going for 2 months and it hasn't failed yet. Why would it fail just in the next 10 minutes? I answer all of these points and I say to myself, if I get to a point I can't answer, then maybe that is the answer. Maybe that's a justified fear and I should change what I'm doing or kind of manage what I'm doing. And that technique kind of works for any type of fear, really. It's that kind of rationally addressing it. It's not pretending it doesn't exist. It's rationally addressing it. And if you're not equipped to mitigate against that fear, then normally there's something that you can do, either on the land, in training, in preparation, in equipment, that is going to help you address a fear.
Oh, I love that. I'm thinking in terms of entrepreneurial ventures. I don't know why I went there, but I think many people avoid taking the necessary risks for the big win because of fear. And I love the steps. List everything, mitigate them, determine how you're going to, what you're going to do if these eventualities happen, and that builds the confidence to do what needs to be done.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and not everything goes right. It doesn't.
Yeah. No.
But so long as you've thought things through, and a lot of solo sailing is about imagining what is going to go wrong. You're constantly, one of the things I do is I both in kind of in my business world and in kind of the sports world, I'm constantly saying, well, what's the worst case scenario here, and can I manage it? Can I live with it? When I started my first Vendée Globe campaign, I didn't have a sponsor. I basically took out a £25,000 loan to start £1 million racing campaign. And I just decided, okay, well, I'm going to just do something every day to make this happen. And every day I will try an inch closer to my goal. And what's the worst case that's going to happen? Well, I can't do the race and I don't make it and I end up with a lot of debt. And I just kind of thought, well, I can cope with that. I can deal with that. What the flip side is, can you deal with not trying? Can you deal with going through your life wishing you'd done something and not doing it? And it's normally that flip side that is the thing that gives me the nudge towards things that I'm frightened of.
More afraid of not trying to do the thing than trying to do the thing and failing. Or maybe it's not, fear is a wrong way to look at it, but the consequences, it's like, who do I want to be? The person who tried or the person who didn't?
That's exactly it. And that's kind of another point I bring out in the book. I think for a long time, I was very fixated on the Vendée Globe race, and it's a professional yacht race. You need sponsors, you need the right level of funding and the right level of experience to enter it. And for a long time, I was trapped in this idea that the Vendée Globe was the thing. I was aiming towards the Vendée Globe. That was what I wanted to do. But my biggest blocker was that I could not work out how on earth I was ever going to raise the funds or find a sponsor that would enable me to do the race. And then I kind of suddenly thought, why is it that I want to do the Vendée Globe? Well, it's because I want to be a good enough sailor to succeed in the Vendée Globe. And then it just suddenly dawned on me, this isn't about what I want to do, it's about who I want to be. And so I broke down who a Vendée Globe sailor is, what skills do they need, what experience do they need. And I went out and I found those things in more achievable ways. And I built myself into the kind of sailor that could do the Vendée Globe. Because, that eventually did take me to 2 Vendée Globe races, which is amazing. But I think I realised that I was so blocked by thinking I had to have this gold-plated version of what I wanted instead of understanding who that person should be or could be and trying to make myself into that person instead of just doing a race. Does that make sense?
It does. It's the difference between doing a thing and being a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a huge difference.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's not what you want to do, it's who you want to be.
Right. Wow. And sometimes we need that level of commitment. We have to identify with something that completely to make it work.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend some time pondering that one, Pip, because I think that is powerful. So powerful. Really, really cool stuff. You have an upcoming TV series?
So they have made a docuseries of the Vendée Globe race. It's been made by Red Bull Studios, and it features 6 teams. 5 of them are French teams, and one of them's me. And
Yay.
It's still in production, but it will be coming out, we think, in November or December this year, probably on a big streaming service. I'm guessing it's going to be someone like Netflix, maybe. But it kind of, if anybody keeps an eye out for that, it's called Solo Around the World, and that should be kind of on TVs later on this year.
Solo Around the World. Oh, I can't wait. That will be a fun one. And then you're involved with the Ocean Youth Trust. What is the Ocean Youth Trust?
So the Ocean Youth Trust is a charity in the UK that offers sailing opportunities to young people from all backgrounds. And kind of one of the big things for me is that, I believe that sailing is a sport. It's a very diverse sport in terms of the disciplines it can offer, because there are so many different kinds of sailing you can do. You can do little dinghy sailing on your reservoir, you can do crazy sailing like me, you can go on tall ships, kind of expedition vessels. There's a different kind of sailing for everyone. It's very adaptable. It can be adapted to all sorts of physical abilities. But certainly in the UK, sailing isn't as available to as many socioeconomic groups as I believe it should be. And the Ocean Youth Trust offers sailing experiences for a diverse group of young people. And it just teaches them the joys of being on the water. It takes them out into the English Channel, sometimes kind of over to France or the Channel Islands. It teaches them about the weather, about sailing, about teamwork, about cooking on board, about living on board. And I just think it gives incredible opportunities to young people, and I'm a very passionate supporter of the charity.
Ooh, I want to do it. That sounds fantastic. So much fun. Wow. So that's the Ocean Youth Trust. The TV series that's coming out toward the end of the year is Solo Around the World.
Yeah.
Your book is My Element, and it doesn't have the dismasting, but it does have the Vendée Globe race and life lessons learned from that. Wow, we've covered a lot, but I have the feeling we have only barely scratched the surface here, Pip. But thank you so much for your time and sharing with us. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners did too.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation.
Oh, absolutely. And, I always say it, get out there and have some fun. Wow, does this sound like fun to me? I would like to learn more, and maybe someday I could call myself a sailor. I don't know. That sounds like so much fun, Pip. So thanks again, and everyone do get out there and have some fun.